The King Louis XIV Sorcerer's Son Part 3. Chapter 16. The Queen's War. By morning, the mood in Versailles had shifted. Doors that once opened for Julien now closed in silence. Conversations halted when he passed. Servants avoided eye contact. Something had changed. The Queen had moved first. De Rosier confirmed it in a whispered exchange by the stables. 3 of our allies have disappeared, letters burned, records sealed. Moreau fled Paris under cover of night. The bishop's estate was ransacked. And Mortaine's men are suddenly everywhere. Julien nodded grimly. She's silencing the cracks. Because she knows the dam is about to break. That afternoon, Julien was barred from entering the council chamber. No explanation. No formal order. Just a pair of guards in gold-trimmed sashes standing like stone. Under whose command? Julien demanded. They didn't answer. But he didn't need them to. The Queen had struck at the heart of his legitimacy, removing him from the king's side, isolating him before the court could see the truth. He turned away, cloak whipping behind him. Not defeated. Just rearmed. That night, a summons arrived. Julien was to present himself the next morning before the High Chamberlain and a panel of selected lords. Charge: practicing witchcraft within the palace. A second parchment followed. A hearing for the safety of Versailles, and the crown itself. Julien stared at the scroll. It was written in Queen Marie-Thérese's own hand. When Adeline heard, she stormed into Julien's chambers for the first time without a knock. Witchcraft? After everything you've done to protect this place? She's desperate, Julien said. Cornered. This is her final move. They could execute you. Only if they believe her. This is Versailles. She snapped. They'll believe anyone wearing a crown. He met her gaze. Then we make sure they see who's really holding the dagger. In her private wing, the Queen met with Mortaine and a royal inquisitor in a candlelit chamber. On the table before them lay a lock of dark hair, a forged grimoire with fabricated blood spells, a chalice laced with residue. Place this in his chamber, the Queen ordered. Let the guards find it. He'll deny it. Then we'll force a confession. And if he doesn't break? She smiled. We'll break him. That night, as Julien slept in a warded trance, he heard the faintest click from the lock. His eyes snapped open. He spoke one word. Etherflare. The wards ignited. And in the flare of violet flame, he saw them, 2 men dressed as guards, planting the forged grimoire in his writing desk. They fled before he could catch them, but not before Julien saw what they left behind. Proof of the Queen's last crime. He didn't sleep. He prepared. Versailles awoke buzzing. Every hallway was alive with rumor. The Queen accuses the Count of dark magic. They say he speaks to ghosts through mirrors. The King has remained silent. Inside the throne room, the gallery filled. The Queen arrived in white and pearls, looking every bit the grieving guardian of France. Julien entered through the side chamber. Dressed in black. Holding his mother's grimoire. He bowed. And said, If you want a trial, then let it begin. Chapter 17. The Trial of Shadows. Versailles had never been more still. The long hall was draped in velvet and lined with towering mirrors. Sunlight cut through the windows like golden blades. Nobles packed the seats on either side of the aisle, fans fluttering, eyes narrowed. At the far end of the chamber sat King Louis XIV, cloaked in royal red, wearing no expression. To his right, Queen Marie-Thérèse, dressed in mourning black with a delicate veil, as if she were the victim. At center stood Julien, a single figure in shadowed black, ringed by guards. He carried no sword. Only his mother's grimoire. The Queen's voice echoed, soft and controlled. This man, this stranger, came to Versailles under false title. He brings with him poison, sorcery, and the corrupting arts our crown has outlawed for a generation. She turned slightly toward the crowd. We do not burn men for shadows. But we must not let shadows rule men. He is not who he claims to be. He speaks languages no court has heard. He walks corridors no noble was shown. He poisons the mind of my niece and consorts with those who would see the king undone. A gasp. Not many, but loud enough to matter. I present as evidence this. She held up the forged grimoire planted in Julien's room. A tome of hexes and blood oaths. Found in his chamber by loyal guards. The crowd began to turn, eyes narrowing, nobles whispering into lace gloves. Could it be true? He always did seem unnatural. He came from nowhere. If the queen says so. And then Julien spoke. His voice didn't rise. It cut. Versailles is a palace of masks. You wear yours so well, your majesty. He stepped forward, not defiant but sure. Yes, I came here under another name. Because the queen's last gift to my mother was fire. And silence. She erased Charlotte de Grailly. Burned her. Hid her body beneath stone. A tremor passed through the room. I am her son. And I have returned not to curse the crown, but to protect it. He opened the Rio grimoire, Charlotte's book. The air shimmered. The pages turned of their own accord. A single sheet rose from its center and floated before the court, a letter in Louis XIV's own hand. I acknowledge our son, Julien de Grailly. Let him inherit what I could not protect. The king stood. That is my seal. And my blood. He turned to the chamber. This court owes its safety to my son, who has uncovered treason at its highest level. All eyes turned back to Julien. He was glowing, not in magic, but in clarity. You want more proof? He asked. He held out the forged grimoire. This book was placed in my room by two men. He whispered. Verum lumen. The book burst with violet flame, revealing Mortaine's sigil burned into the cover, hidden beneath a glamour. Another gasp. This time louder. The queen rose. This is sorcery. Lies. All of it. Julien turned to her calm. You tried to erase one woman from history. You buried her child. Then you tried to do it again. He stepped forward until only the guards stood between them. Your Majesty. Your war is over. The king raised a hand. Marie-Thérèse of Austria, Queen of France, your presence is no longer welcome in Versailles. You will be confined to Montferrat estate under guard. Your titles revoked. Your allies dismissed. You will live. But never again shall you rule. The queen's face did not move. But her fingers gripped the side of her chair like claws. She said nothing. As if even she now feared what her words might bring. Julien turned slowly, looking out across the court. The faces that once doubted him now bowed. Adeline stood near the chamber doors. Tears in her eyes. But smiling. The masks had cracked. The truth had won. But the game of Versailles was far from over. Chapter 18: The Rescue in the Vaults. The order of exile had been given. The queen was gone, her carriage escorted by armed guards to Montferrat, her titles stripped, her allies scattered. The court buzzed with the drama of it all. Julien, though weary, finally allowed himself a breath of quiet. The war had turned in his favor. Until dusk fell. And Adeline vanished. She never returned to her chambers. A maid found her cloak tossed beside the hearth, a wine glass overturned, and, most chillingly, a broken charm string lying on the floor. Julien had given her that string, enchanted to alert him if she was touched with malice. It had not alerted him. It had been shattered. Captain de Rosier rushed into Julien's quarters as he was readying a report for the king. She's gone, the captain said. No sign of a struggle. No note. No witnesses. Julien's hand gripped the edge of the desk so tightly the wood cracked. He took her. Mortain? Who else has reason left to die? Julien opened Charlotte's grimoire, flipped to a sigil called Threadwalker, a tracking spell that revealed paths connected by magical residue. He pricked his finger, let a drop of blood touch the page, and whispered, "Show me where they've hidden what I love." The page pulsed. Lines of ink stretched across the parchment, first chaotic, then aligning into a map. Below Versailles. A vault not marked on any chart. A single word appeared across the parchment. Cellier d'Aublis, the cellar of the forgotten. Julien and Desrosiers entered the dungeons beneath the palace after dark, bribing 2 guards and disabling a magical seal with a glyph of his own invention. As they passed the final gate, Desrosiers whispered, "No one has walked this way in decades. He's counting on that." Julien muttered. The air thickened. Damp stone. Distant drips. And silence, the kind that held breath hostage. At the end of the corridor was a door of iron-laced oak. Carved into it, a crest of thorns and a serpent. Mortain's personal seal. Julien forced the door open with a kinetic pulse. Inside, the room was circular, lit only by 3 enchanted lanterns casting green light on the damp walls. Chains hung from the ceiling. And in the center, Adeline. She was bound by her wrists, arms raised above her head. Her dress was torn at the sleeve, her hair tangled. She looked up when the door opened. Her eyes lit with recognition. "Julien!" Before she could say more, Mortain stepped from the shadows, blade drawn. "I thought it would take you longer," he sneered. Julien's hand crackled with magic. "Let her go. You took everything from me," the Baron hissed. "My seat. My allies. My queen. You took what I built over 20 years. Now I take what you love." Desrosiers stepped forward, sword drawn. But Mortain flicked his wrist, and the air filled with razor-thin wires woven of cursed metal. One sliced across the captain's arm. "He's warded," Julien warned. "Let me." He stepped forward, conjuring a warding sphere around Adeline to protect her. Mortain lunged. Julien countered with a blast of raw kinetic force, hurling the Baron backward. But Mortain rolled, recovered, and threw a hex blade enchanted to bend gravity. Julien caught it with a magnetism spell, snapping it midair. "You're no sorcerer," Mortain snarled. "No," Julien said coldly. "I'm my mother's son." The duel turned savage. Magic and steel clashed in bursts of heat and smoke. Chains fell. Wards cracked. Desrosiers helped Adeline down as Julien fought, bleeding from a shallow cut on his temple. Mortain lunged for Adeline in a last desperate strike. Julien dropped his blade and raised both hands. Ignis Reina. Fire of collapse. The ground cracked. Mortain screamed as violet flame wrapped around his limbs, not burning, but binding. Julien stepped forward and whispered, "You tried to kill a bloodline, but you only made it remember." Desrosiers stepped in with shackles. Mortain was barely breathing. "He'll live," the captain said. "Long enough to be tried." Adeline staggered into Julien's arms. "You came," she whispered. He held her close. "There was never a second I wouldn't." As they emerged into the dawn light, Adeline leaning against him, nobles on the steps gasped and stepped aside. Julien said nothing. He met their gazes. And for the first time, no one whispered. No one doubted. The air had risen. Not from gold, but from shadow, blood, and fire. Chapter 19. Blades in the Hall of Mirrors. The duel was inevitable. Word spread like wildfire. Julien de Grailly, accused of deception, treason, and sorcery, would answer the accusations not with spellcraft, but with his blade. A trial by combat. Traditional. Dangerous. Legal. One final move, de Rosier muttered. They know they've lost in the courts. Now they want to break you in the open. Who challenged me? Julien asked. Etienne de Vallier. Julien paused. The name was familiar. He was once betrothed to Adeline, de Rosier added grimly. By royal decree, the duel would be held in the Galerie de Glaces, the Hall of Mirrors, Versailles Grandest Chamber. The floor was cleared of carpets. The chandeliers dimmed to cold silver. Along the edges stood the entire court, silent and radiant in silks and powdered wigs. On the dais, King Louis XIV sat unmoving. Next to him, Adeline, pale but composed. Mortain, now imprisoned in the Bastille, could no longer act. But his poison still lingered. This duel would either end the whispers or ignite new ones. He stepped into the chamber wearing no noble colors, just deep black, with silver embroidery along his cuffs, thorns entwined with flame. At his hip, a long sword enchanted not to cast spells, but to resist them. The blade had belonged to his uncle, once. Now it was his. Across the chamber stood Etienne de Vallier, lean and cold-eyed, clad in royal blue and armed with a dueling rapier. He looked like a man who expected to win. My honor demands this, de Vallier said to the king. Then your blood shall answer for it, Julien replied. The king's herald stepped forward. Combat will proceed until first blood, or surrender. Should either combatant call for magic, he forfeits the duel. The court leaned forward. Everyone knew what they were really here to see. Would the sorcerer fight as a man? Or as a monster? The blades clashed. Quick. Fluid. Sharp as silver speech. De Vallier fought with precision, years of fencing under masters in Paris and Madrid. But Julien had learned elsewhere, in battlefields of silence, in forests laced with ghosts, in chambers where magic taught him how to breathe like a blade. He moved with economy. Purpose. No waste. No theatrics. Only threat. De Vallier feinted left, struck right, scored a slash across Julien's arm. The crowd gasped. Julien didn't flinch. He adjusted his grip. And said softly, "That was for Charlotte." He countered. Steel rang like song. His blade sliced clean across de Vallier's thigh. Blood bloomed red against blue silk. The duel was over. De Vallier dropped to one knee, clutching his leg, panting. Julien stood above him. He could have ended it. Pressed the blade to his neck. Demanded silence. But instead, he lowered his sword, turned, and walked away. The silence was thunderous. Then, a single noble clapped. Then another. And another. Until the chamber rang with applause. Not wild. Not theatrical. Respectful. Julien had won more than the duel. He had won Versailles. King Louis XIV rose from the throne and spoke to all assembled. Let it be known. Julien de Grailly, son of Charlotte, defender of the realm, has earned his place in this court not by name, but by merit, blade, and blood. He looked down the hall. The sun does not fear shadows. It burns them away. As Julien left the chamber, Adeline met him at the doors. No words. Just a look. And in that look, everything that mattered. Chapter 20: The King's Judgment. 2 days after the duel, the entire royal court received a formal summons. No exceptions. The Chamberlain's scrolls read, By order of His Majesty, all members of the royal court shall assemble in the Salon de Guerre for a matter of dynastic declaration and correction. The court buzzed like a hive of anxious bees. He's naming the sorcerer. Or exiling him. Or worse, he's going to name him his heir. No one knew the truth. Except Julien. Julien stood before the mirror in his private chamber, dressed not in mourning black, but deep royal violet, trimmed in silver. The obsidian ring gleamed on his finger, no longer glamoured. He let it be seen. No more masks, he whispered. Adeline stood beside him in a dove-grey gown, her hair braided with her mother's silver locket. Are you ready? She asked. Julien looked into the mirror one last time, and saw his mother's eyes looking back. Yes. The court gathered beneath the painted ceilings of Mars and Minerva, gods of war and wisdom. King Louis XIV stood not on the throne, but at the center of the chamber, hands clasped behind his back, dressed in ceremonial crimson trimmed with gold. He spoke without announcement, without flourish. Versailles is built on power, he said. But not all power wears a crown. He turned slowly. There are some truths we once hid. For fear. For shame. For politics. But fear has no place beneath the sun. Let the court bear witness. He stepped aside and gestured to Julien. Julien walked forward into the center of the chamber, every eye following him. He carried Charlotte's grimoire, but held it closed. He didn't need magic now. He needed truth. My name is Julien de Grailly, born of Charlotte, sworn to no house, raised in shadow. The queen tried to erase my mother. Then my name. Then my life. She failed. He held up the parchment, the king's sealed declaration from the crypt. His Majesty has confirmed my bloodline. But it is not blood that makes a man worthy. It is what he protects. He turned to face the nobles. You feared my magic. But you live beneath a roof built on silence and betrayal. No longer. Louis XIV raised a golden scroll and opened it. Let it be written. Julien de Grailly, son of Charlotte, born of royal line, is hereby recognized as noble in full standing. He shall bear the title, Duke of Montseal. He shall command his own estate. He shall advise the crown in matters arcane and unseen. And any who speak against his bloodline shall be judged as if they speak against mine. A stunned silence fell. Then, a few nobles bowed. Then more. And more. Until the court dropped to its knees before the king's son in all but name. Louis turned to Julien. You remind me of her. But you carry something more. Julien bowed his head. Her courage. Your fire. And something that belongs to either of you, me. From the sidelines, Adeline watched him rise not as a weapon, but as a man forged by fire and dignity. And as he turned to her, smiling just slightly, she knew. He was ready to rule his own fate. Chapter 21: The Fall of the Queen. The carriage ride took nearly a day. Julien rode alone, with only a single guard for formality. He didn't need protection. Not now. He had requested the visit himself. No royal escort. No fanfare. Just a letter delivered to the Queen's estate. I seek no vengeance. Only closure. I will arrive with the dawn. He expected no reply. He received none. But he knew she would be waiting. Montferrat was beautiful and suffocating. A country manor with ivy-covered balconies and wild roses strangling the iron gates. Guard towers stood at each corner of the property, more for honor than threat. Julien stepped out into the mist-covered morning. A servant led him through the overgrown courtyard, through quiet halls draped in aging velvet, and into a private garden shaded by olive trees. There sat the Queen. Marie-Thérèse of Austria. Uncrowned. Unpainted. Her hair loose. Her gown simple. She looked smaller than he remembered. But no less dangerous. She didn't rise when he approached. She simply looked at him. Not with fear. Not with hatred. With something worse. Curiosity. So, she said, You've come. Julien nodded. You knew I would. I was counting on it. A pause. The wind stirred the branches above them. You look like her, the Queen murmured. But you don't carry her softness. You burn that out of me, Julien replied. Why? His voice cracked slightly, despite his control. Why her? Why me? You had power. The throne. The king. Why was she such a threat to you? Marie-Thérèse tilted her head. Because your mother did what I could not. She made him love her. She stood in a palace that should have broken her, and bent it around her with kindness, with laughter, with defiance. She was everything I wasn't allowed to be. Her voice dropped lower. She made the Sun King look away from the sun. A long silence followed. Then she added more bitterly. And you were proof that I was never enough. So you killed her, he said. I erased her, the Queen whispered. Because I thought, if no one remembered her, perhaps I could forget her too. But you didn't. No. She looked up at him now. And then you came. And ruined it all. Julien stepped forward and placed something on the stone table between them. It was a letter, his own hand, sealed with the Montseal crest. This is my final word to you. I will never seek to destroy what remains of you. That power is beneath me. But I will not protect your name either. Let history judge you. Let it remember what you did. And what I chose not to do. She stared at the letter. Pity, then, she said softly. You could have been a great king. I don't want your throne, Julien said. I have something better. My name. As he turned to leave, she called out. Do you hate me? Julien stopped. Then looked over his shoulder. No. I outgrew that. You are not worthy of my hate anymore. He walked away. The wind rose behind him. And the Queen finally bowed her head. Julien returned before sunset. Adeline was waiting at the steps. Did she say anything? Enough, Julien said. But she heard more. They walked together through the golden halls. No guards. No whispers. Only silence. And peace. Chapter 22. A Wedding of Names. Versailles hadn't seen such a proclamation in years. Gold-trimmed scrolls were hand-delivered to the nobles of court, the cathedral bells rung at dawn, and the king's herald stood in the main square to recite the words. By command of His Majesty Louis XIV, let it be known, the Duke of Montseal, Julien de Grailly, shall be joined in sacred union to the Marquise Adeline de Crécy, heiress of Belleval. The crown rejoices in the restoration of two names once silenced, and welcomes the birth of a new legacy. For the first time in decades, the court did not whisper behind fans and folded gazes. They applauded. The wedding was to be held in Versailles private chapel, not the grand one used for royal baptisms, but the intimate chapel of Saint Etienne, once closed for restoration. Julien chose it deliberately. This is where my mother prayed, he told Adeline. Then it's where I'll say my vows, she whispered. The altar was draped in silver and violet. The stained glass was polished to such clarity it caught the sun like cut diamonds. White lilies were placed along the aisle, Charlotte's favorite. And among the petals, a quiet enchantment Julien crafted himself, whispers of protection woven into the scent. No harm would touch her here. Adeline walked through the golden hall alone. No guardian. No uncle. No baron to claim her hand. She walked beneath the gaze of Versailles with her chin high, her gown pale silver threaded with vines of soft lavender. At her throat she wore her mother's locket. At her hip, a blade, ceremonial but real, gifted by Julien. She was not a prize. She was a partner. Julien stood at the altar, dressed in noble black with a mantle of deep violet, lined in silver and stitched with twin crests, Montseal and Belleval, interwoven at last. At his side stood Desrosiers, dashing and uncharacteristically emotional. "If your mother could see this." "She can," Julien replied quietly. The ceremony began. Not with scripture, but with a reading from Charlotte's recovered letters, a passage she wrote to Julien before his birth. "Let the world call you nameless, my son. Let it shut doors, seal books, tear banners. You will be made of what cannot be erased. You will carry light into locked rooms." Then, as silence fell, Julien turned to Adeline. He took her hand. "I have fought against fire, steel, and blood to reclaim a name once burned. But today, I choose a name that was never taken from me. Husband." She smiled, eyes shining. "And I, who was taught to kneel before power, now rise beside it. As wife. As equal." The priest gave the formal blessing. But before he could finish the words, Julien pulled Adeline close. They kissed before the crown, the court, and the ghosts of a palace that had once tried to kill them both. The applause was thunder. The king stood. And for the first time in living memory, he wept. That night, the palace was reborn. Gone were the masks, the poison, the schemes. There was music, real music, not politic minuets, but wild, roaring strings and laughter in the marble halls. Even the queen's former allies danced. As if some deep sickness had finally left the air. Julien and Adeline danced together only once. They didn't need to perform. They needed only to look at each other. And the whole court believed in magic again.
Across every empire, every forgotten age, stories still whisper. If this tale stirred your spirit, leave a like to honor the echoes of the past. Share your thoughts in the comments. Every voice weaves a new legend into the sands of time. And subscribe to our YouTube channel Historical Fantasy Stories, where myths walk beside history, and every discovery changes the world. The next forgotten legend is waiting to be found.